You're alone, or at least you should be. There are no footsteps, no voices, no rustling beyond the walls, no windows open, no eyes around. And yet, something watches. It doesn't move, it doesn't breathe, but it knows you're there. You feel it not in sound, but in stillness, in the weight of the air, in the invisible pressure behind your back, as though something leans forward, just outside the reach of your senses. It watches, not aggressively, not even necessarily with malice, but with presence. A presence that doesn't blink, that doesn't retreat when you turn on the light. And if you've ever felt this, you're not alone. In fact, this sensation is nearly universal. Children speak of it often, of a presence in the room once the lights go out, of eyes behind the closet door, of corners that feel thick. But even adults feel it, late at night, in forests, in unfamiliar hotel rooms, or even in their own bedrooms on a night that feels just a little too still. And no matter how many times you tell yourself it's just imagination, your body doesn't agree. Your breath shortens, your spine stiffens, your ears sharpen, your heart anticipates. Why? Why would something as simple as solitude make you feel watched? Modern science says it's biology, that your brain evolved to anticipate danger, to feel the tiger in the grass before it lunges, to survive by sensing what isn't yet visible. There is truth in this. The ancient mind was never truly alone. It lived in packs. It hunted with eyes behind it. It built fires not for warmth, but to mark a circle against what stared from the woods. So we became sensitive to gaze. Even now, in crowds, we feel when someone's eyes lock onto us from across a room. Without turning, without sound, our skin alerts us. The body knows. But that doesn't explain everything, because the sensation we're speaking of now is not just biological, it's metaphysical. It doesn't feel like fear. It feels like contact. Not with a person, but with something else. Something without form, without face, but undeniable. And the strange thing is, sometimes it feels almost familiar, like an old awareness that lingers, not cold, not cruel, just quiet. Watching. Is it imagination? Is it spirit? Is it memory? Some call it paranoia. Some call it trauma. But others, the mystics, the seekers, the ancient ones, called it something else. They said, there's that which sees even when no eyes are open. And if you've ever walked into a room and felt the sudden need to speak aloud, even though no one is there, if you've ever looked over your shoulder in a silent forest, if you've ever turned off your screen and felt that the silence was somehow crowded, then you've brushed against it. That presence that doesn't blink. It doesn't want to frighten you. It doesn't even hide. It simply is. And perhaps it's not even outside of you. Perhaps the reason you feel watched when you are alone is because part of you is finally still enough to notice that you are always watching. That consciousness itself is not confined to your thoughts. That behind the noise of mind, behind the flow of distractions, there is something deeper, older, quieter, and that thing is aware. So when all the noise stops, when you are finally alone, when the masks fall and the roles dissolve, that awareness remains. And maybe you call it God. Maybe you call it the higher self. Or maybe it has no name at all. But it waits. It watches. Not in judgment, but in remembering. Because what you feel in those silent moments, when something unseen turns its gaze upon you, may not be something foreign. It may be the part of you that you've forgotten how to listen to. The part that never blinks, that never sleeps, that always watches. Long before modern walls, before electricity, before screens lit up the night, there was fire, and around that fire, eyes. Eyes of kin, eyes of predators, eyes of spirits that lived in wind and wood. The ancient mind was not built in silence, it was shaped in presence. Presence of the seen, presence of the unseen. You did not eat alone, you did not sleep alone. You were born, lived, and died under the watch of others, and not just people. The early human believed the forest watched, that animals watched, that gods, stars, ancestors, and ghosts all watched. The boundary between inner and outer, between imagination and reality, was not yet sealed. To think something was to touch it. To dream of something was to summon it. To speak its name was to invoke its gaze. This wasn't superstition. This was how reality worked. So it should be no surprise that your mind, even now, still reacts to being alone as though someone's there. Because for hundreds of thousands of years, someone always was. Evolution made it this way. Our ancestors survived not because they were the strongest, but because they were aware. Aware of rustling leaves, of subtle shifts in breath, of silence that felt too quiet. To sense eyes in the dark was to avoid becoming prey. And even now, your nervous system responds to that ancestral programming. A creak of wood behind you, a flicker in the corner of your vision, a chill down the back of your neck. It isn't just imagination, it's memory. Old memory, biological memory. There's a part of your brain, the amygdala, that constantly scans for threat, even when you're resting, even when you're alone, especially when you're alone. Because solitude once meant vulnerability. Away from the group, you were exposed. You had no help, no warning. So your mind sharpened. It began to create ghosts even when none were there, just in case. It's safer to imagine a watcher and be wrong than to ignore one and not survive. So the body listens even now. Even in apartments, even in locked rooms, even in cities full of people. The moment you're alone, your system reactivates the old protocol. Who's there? What moved? Is something watching? But here's where it becomes more than biology. Because there's a part of you that doesn't just fear the watcher, it longs for it. We are wired for reflection, to be seen, to be mirrored, to have our existence validated by the gaze of another. So when you're truly alone, part of the discomfort isn't just fear, it's absence. Absence of confirmation, absence of witness, absence of meaning. And into that absence, your psyche projects something. Someone, some presence. Not because you're broken, but because you're designed to be perceived. Even infants respond differently when looked at. Their biology changes, their heart rate stabilizes, their sense of self develops through the gaze of another. So what happens when the other is gone? The mind creates it. An echo, a placeholder, a watcher. Sometimes it feels neutral, sometimes benevolent, sometimes terrifying. But it's always there, because you were never meant to be unobserved. The self, in its deepest function, requires a mirror. And if no mirror is present, one is imagined. Not in vain, not in weakness, but because for millennia, that imagined presence was very real. Whether it was a tiger, a god, a spirit, or a dead relative, the watcher kept us aware. So next time you feel eyes on you when no one is there, remember, you carry inside you a mind shaped by vigilance, a nervous system trained by silence, a soul that has always been watched by forests, by stars, by ancestors, by the inner self. And maybe, just maybe, what you feel is not a threat, but a reminder that even in solitude, you are seen. Long before surveillance cameras, before satellites, before security systems blinked in dark corners, there were watchers, not mechanical, not made of wires or lenses, but living, breathing, or perhaps something beyond breath. Every ancient culture knew them, spoke of them, feared them, revered them. They had different names, but the pattern was the same: eyes that did not close. In Mesopotamia, they were the Agigi, the gods who watched from above, silent, ever-present, beings who kept watch over humanity, recording, intervening, testing. In the Book of Enoch, they were known more ominously: the Watchers, a group of angels sent to observe the world, but who fell from their place when they desired too much. They descended, they taught, they mingled with humanity and paid the price. But their name remained: the Watchers, eyes that broke the barrier between heaven and earth. In Egypt, the Eye of Horus watched over the land, not just a symbol but a force, a presence of protection and judgment, the eye that sees all, that restores order when chaos tries to reign. In Christianity, the Eye of Providence floated above the world inside a triangle, wrapped in light, a symbol adopted by mystics, rulers, architects. But it was older than doctrine, older than dogma, because the feeling of being watched was not a fear of man, it was a memory of the gods. In the Norse world, Odin gave up one eye to gain true sight. He became a god who sees beyond form, through time, through lies, through fate. His missing eye wasn't a loss, it was a trade. To become a watcher. In the East, Buddhism speaks of the devas, celestial beings who observe humanity as one watches ripples on a pond, not with cruelty, but with curiosity. They do not always intervene, they simply watch. And in indigenous cosmologies across the globe, the world is alive with eyes. Mountains see, rivers remember, stones hold witness. The land watches us as much as we walk upon it. This is not metaphor, this is ontology. The very being of the world includes attention. So why does this matter now? Because when you feel watched, your body may be responding to a story deeper than personal memory. It may be ancestral, mythic, archetypal. You are part of a lineage that always lived beneath the gaze of powers. Sometimes divine, sometimes monstrous, sometimes unknowable, but always present. The Watchers were not always benevolent. Some guarded the gates between worlds. Some punished those who dared to trespass. Some watched in silence, mirroring your every movement, judging nothing, but never blinking. Even in modern times, the archetype remains. In alien abduction stories, in ghost sightings, in shadow people, in stories of men in black and faceless figures at the foot of the bed. Always the feeling is the same. I am not alone. Something is watching, and it sees deeper than I do. So what if that sensation, that prickling at the back of your neck, is not your imagination, but your inheritance? What if, buried in your bones, is the echo of all those old stories? The ones that said, "There are eyes upon the world, and they are older than time." We no longer carve them into temple walls, but they remain in our dreams, in our fears, in the silence after midnight. They were never gone. The Watchers endure, not as superstition, but as symbol, as truth dressed in myth. And maybe, when you are alone in a dark room and feel that strange sensation creeping in. You are not being haunted. You are being remembered, not by a ghost, but by the ancient memory of what it meant to be seen by something more. Stand in a quiet room, no sound, no motion, only stillness. Now breathe, look around, and feel, truly feel the space. At first, it may seem empty, just air and walls and silence, but wait long enough and something begins to stir beneath the surface. Not physically, energetically, intuitively. The room is not blank. It holds presence. It holds memory. It watches, not with eyes, but with structure. Because space, true space, is never neutral. It reflects back what you bring into it. It responds. Ancient builders knew this. The temples of Egypt, the ziggurats of Mesopotamia, the megaliths of Stonehenge, they weren't simply monuments. They were instruments, built with precision, aligned to stars, measured in sacred ratios. Why? Because the architecture itself was designed to channel the unseen, to focus attention, to summon presence, to invite contact. These spaces didn't just hold rituals, they were rituals. Geometry became invocation. A corridor was a tunnel through dimensions. A dome became a vault of heaven. A threshold marked the boundary between two worlds. The place shaped the experience. And more importantly, the place shaped the presence. Because presence follows pattern. This is why some rooms feel heavy, why abandoned buildings can still feel full, why a church can hum with reverence even when empty. Space absorbs intention. Emotion leaves residue. Attention leaves footprints. Prayer leaves echoes. And over time, a location becomes something more than bricks and air. It becomes inhabited. Not by ghosts necessarily, but by the invisible structure of everything that ever occurred within it. You feel this. When you walk into a hospital at night, when you step into a battlefield preserved in grass, when you enter an old library or a childhood home long emptied, something lingers, something watches, and yet it's not limited to old places. Even your room, your desk, your bed, your mirror all carry impressions of who you've been and what you felt. Every time you thought, prayed, wept, or sat in silence, you left a trace. And these traces speak back. They form patterns in the unseen architecture of the world around you. You may not see them, but your nervous system does. It reacts. It tenses. It feels that something's here without knowing why. The ancient world didn't separate space from spirit. Temples were aligned to constellations not for beauty, but for resonance. The architecture became an amplifier of thought, of prayer, of presence. And in such places, people didn't wonder if they were being watched. They expected to be. Because sacred geometry was a conversation. Every angle, every axis, every shadow a message. A signal, a whisper. You are not alone. And even outside of temples, even in nature, the same principle applied. A cave wasn't just shelter, it was womb, gateway, resonator. A mountain was more than rock, it was a throne, an altar, a sentinel. So when you walk into a quiet room and feel watched, you may be sensing the invisible architecture that has always surrounded you. Not man-made, not artificial, but felt. And maybe the watcher isn't something else at all. Maybe it is space itself awakened by your attention. Because the moment you truly become present, so does everything else. Walls that were silent begin to speak. Corners that were dark begin to shimmer. And the very air around you feels like it is breathing. Watching, waiting, not with judgment, not with intent, but with awareness. Because presence is not passive. It listens, it remembers, and when you are alone enough to notice, you realize the world is never still. It is always watching. Through form, through field, through the subtle architecture of the unseen. What if the one watching you is you? Not the you that thinks or fears or forgets, but the deeper you, the one beneath identity, the one that does not speak but always sees. We imagine the gaze as something external, an outside presence, a shadow in the room, a being with eyes not our own. But what if that feeling of being watched is not about intrusion, but about return? Return of your own attention to the place it came from, to the place it hides when you're distracted, when you perform, when you pretend. Because when you are alone, truly alone, something shifts. The masks slip, the noise fades, the roles fall away. And in that quiet, you meet yourself. But not the version you built for others, not the self that fits into names or timelines, the watcher within, the eye behind the eyes. Mystics have spoken of it for millennia. In Vedanta, it is called the witness pure awareness, unaffected, unchanging. It watches the thoughts, the emotions, the comings and goings of life, but remains untouched. In Gnostic writings, it is the spark, the seed of divine light buried in flesh. It sees through the illusion of form. It waits behind your dreams, behind your habits, behind your stories. In Sufism, they call it the hidden heart, the part of you that never forgets. And in Jungian psychology, it is the self, not the ego, but the center and circumference of your being. When you feel watched in solitude, you may be brushing against this deeper mirror, not being watched by a ghost, but watched by what is most real in you. And it can feel unsettling, because that part of you does not judge, but it sees through. It sees your distractions, your fears, your longing. It sees who you've become and remembers who you are. Its gaze does not burn, but it reveals. And that's why solitude can feel heavy. Because in the absence of outer mirrors, this inner one awakens. And it reflects without distortion. You cannot pose for it. You cannot lie to it. It doesn't care for achievements, titles, or wounds. It simply holds you exactly as you are. And what you call being watched may actually be a moment of alignment. When attention turns inward, when you remember that you've been split between presence and performance, between essence and appearance, this watcher within has no voice, but you've heard it. In the pause before a decision, in the silence after a mistake, in the awe of a sunrise that leaves you wordless. It speaks not in language but in stillness. And that stillness can feel like pressure when you're not used to it. That's why people fill the room with music, why they turn on screens, why they scroll endlessly. Not because they're bored, but because they're being seen in a way that demands nothing, yet changes everything. Because when the witness returns, you return too. Not to your story, but to your center. And from that center, you begin to see differently. You see your life like a stage. You see your past like a costume. You see the world not as noise, but as signal. Because the watcher within doesn't just observe, it guides. Gently, quietly, unfailingly. It doesn't move your hands, but it knows which way they're going. And when you learn to trust it, you no longer fear being alone. You no longer flinch at silence. You no longer avoid the gaze that waits in empty rooms. Because it's not emptiness, it's not otherness. It's you, unfolded, unmasked, undivided, watching, always, and waiting for you to look back. The feeling of being watched. When alone, could it be more than just your own consciousness? What if the space around you holds echoes, thought forms left behind by others? Ancient wisdom speaks of thought forms, energies shaped by emotion and intention that linger long after their creators have left. These are not ghosts in the classic sense. They are not spirits with desires or will. They are imprints, vibrations in the fabric of reality. A room where anger was shouted still hums with that tension. A place where love was whispered still glows with warmth. A battlefield echoes the chaos of battle. Your home, your office, your street, they all carry layers of energy. And when you step into these spaces alone, sometimes those energies activate, not by magic, but by resonance. Your nervous system picks up the subtle shifts. Your subconscious mind reacts. You feel eyes though no one is there. You hear whispers though the room is silent. You sense presence though you stand by yourself. Psychology calls this residual haunting. The idea that emotional energy can become trapped in environments, creating an atmosphere that feels alive. Science recognizes something similar in the way our brains are wired to seek patterns, to detect faces where none exist, to feel being watched even by a shadow. But ancient traditions go further. They say the world remembers. It is not just inert matter. It is alive with memory and meaning. Every thought you have, every emotion you feel sends ripples outward. And these ripples don't vanish. They collect, they accumulate, they overlap. Sometimes harmoniously, sometimes dissonantly. This is why some places feel haunted, why some houses are hard to leave, why some rooms hold you hostage without a visible chain. It is the architecture of the unseen, and your body remembers it all. So when you feel watched alone, perhaps you are sensing more than your own mind. You are sensing the echoes of others, their fears, their hopes, their pain. And sometimes the watcher is not separate from you, because you are also a thought form, a pattern of energy, a vibration. You leave traces wherever you go. You imprint your presence on the world. You carry the echoes of those before you. And the watchers, whether ancient spirits or echoes of humanity, are part of that vast overlapping web. But this is not to frighten you. It is to awaken you, to remind you that you exist in a living, breathing field. One that remembers, one that watches, and one that waits for you to become fully present to your own presence and to the vast, intricate mystery that holds you. Because in the space where echoes live, you are never truly alone. You are part of the watch and the watched. There is a presence that lingers beyond the physical, an unseen watcher not bound by flesh or space. It is older than the stones beneath your feet, older than the whispers carried on the wind. This presence is not malevolent. It does not seek to harm, nor to control. It waits. In the moments when the world grows quiet, when the distractions fade, when you are utterly alone, it comes forward. Not as a ghost, but as a sentinel of the spirit. Some call it the watcher within, the guardian of thresholds, the observer that keeps vigil between the worlds. In many traditions, this presence is honored. The Kachinas of the Hopi, the Jinn in the Middle East, the ancestral spirits of Africa, the Kami in Japan. All are watchers, keepers of balance. They do not intrude without invitation. They do not interfere with free will, but they are always present. They observe the dance of life, recording the movements of soul and shadow. When you feel watched in solitude, perhaps you are sensing this ancient surveillance not as punishment, but as awareness. It is a reminder that you are part of a greater web woven of time, memory, and spirit. You are never truly alone because your soul is seen, your journey is noted. This presence may also be your own soul's eye, the consciousness beyond consciousness, witnessing from a deeper place. It watches not to judge, but to remember, to hold you in sacred space while you navigate the mysteries of being. So when the feeling arises, the gaze that never blinks, do not recoil. Do not fear. Welcome it as a companion, a guardian, a sign that you are awakening. Because the watcher waits for one thing, for you to see it back, to meet the gaze, to step fully into the light of your own awareness. Only then does the watcher smile and fade back into silence, leaving you not alone but whole. You were never alone, not truly, not ever. Even in the moments when the world falls silent, when shadows deepen and the night presses close, when every creak and whisper seems amplified in your solitude, you are not without witness. That presence, the watcher that lingers just beyond the edge of sight, is not an intruder. It is a companion, a part of your own being that never left, that has watched over you since the beginning, through every fear, every joy, every breath. We forget this truth. Lost in the noise of distraction, we convince ourselves that loneliness is our fate, but the deeper self remembers. It remembers the gaze that never blinks, the silent eyes that hold us steady, the ancient awareness woven into the fabric of our souls. You feel it when you are still enough, the pulse beneath your skin, the quiet light behind your eyes, the subtle knowing that you are held. Not by ghosts, not by strangers, but by yourself, your highest self, your eternal observer. This presence does not judge, it does not demand, it waits with infinite patience, offering a refuge beyond fear and isolation. To be truly seen without masks, without roles, is both terrifying and freeing. Because it strips away illusions, it reveals the vastness beneath the smallness, the timeless beneath the temporal. And yet, it is there always. You carry it within you, a flame that never extinguishes, a light that no darkness can dim. When you feel watched alone, know this. The eyes you sense may be your own, reminding you that you are never apart from yourself, that your consciousness is a circle, endless, unbroken, that within you lies the universe watching back. And in that watching, there is love, there is connection, there is home. You were never alone. Not then, not now, not ever. The presence you feel is the thread that binds all things, the eternal witness that waits patiently for you to remember. To open your eyes fully, to meet your own gaze, to know yourself as seen, held, and whole. And in that knowing, the fear dissolves, the silence sings, the watching becomes peace. Because you are not alone. You are the watcher, the watched, and the space between. And that is the greatest mystery and the deepest truth. You were never alone.